So in this lesson, we're going to be talking about reading and writing decimals. You can go ahead in your table of contents in your math notebook. You can add practice with reading and writing decimals. And remember that I'm going to do the first two examples and you are going to try the third example on your own. Okay. I'm going to do the first two examples and you are going to watch. You're not going to write anything. You're just going to watch. And then you'll do the third example on your own. Okay. So we're going to look at the decimal place value chart. As you can see, we have the thousandths place here, the hundredths place here, the tenths place here, and then comes our decimal if we're working backwards, right? Okay. So normally when we're dealing with whole numbers, those are numbers without a decimal or fraction. And I do want you to write just that part in your notebook, this part that I'm kind of bubbling out right here. Whole numbers are numbers without a decimal or fraction, okay? So anything on this part of our place value chart, ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and millions, those are all whole numbers. But when we start adding decimals on the end, when we start adding tenths or hundredths or thousandths, it turns it into a decimal number. And there's different ways to write decimal numbers, okay? We can write decimal numbers in word form, okay? I can write 325 thousandths. Now, in order to make this a little bit easier for when you're reading and writing decimals, if you have to read it in words and you want to try to write it as a decimal, think of the number as a regular number without that very last word. If I wrote 325, I would write 3, 2, 5. Now this last word, thousandths, indicates where the last digit, which is the 5, should land on my place value chart. Well, when I look up here at my place value chart, the thousandths is right here. So that indicates that my 5 has to go right there, which means my 2 has to be before it, right here, and my 3 has to be before that, right there. So how do I actually write that decimal number? I put a decimal right here, and if I would like, I could put a 0 right here because there's 0 ones in that number. Okay, so a good way if you're writing from word form is to cover up the words and then just write the number regular and then try to put it in your place value chart according to that last digit and that last word in word form. Okay, we're going to look at another example. If I have 4,000 and 503 thousandths. Now there's a lot there, okay? So what I'm going to do when I see a place value word that has THS, I'm going to try to cover that up and see if I can figure it out. Okay, so 4,000, that's the first chunk of word form. I know how to write that. I write that as 4,000. Now next is 503. 503. I have to think about how do I write 503. I know 500 and I know 3, but that doesn't look like 503. That looks like 5,003. So that can't be right. So 503 must look like that. So I have 4,000. Then I have 503 thousandths. Well, one of my keywords is this and. Okay. That and tells me that it's at my decimal place. So I know that it must be 4,000 then a decimal because that and means decimal. Then I have 503. And since I have thousandths, to double check if I'm right, my 3 technically in this number does end in the thousandths place. 3 in the thousandths. 0 here, 5 here, and then I have, that's how I would write that decimal number, 4,000 decimal 503. Okay, break it apart into chunks that you recognize. Okay, I'm going to give you an example to try on your place value chart, and you and I can talk if you have trouble understanding it. Okay. Okay, remember your and always means that's where a decimal goes. So stop and try to write that first chunk out, put a decimal, and then figure out how to write this last little chunk. Okay, remember you can think about these words all together. And the and means a decimal. So try to place that on your, you can write it here first and then try to place it on your place value chart. If you have trouble with that one, we'll talk about it a little later.